I'm Charles, 32 years old, and a captain in the U.S. Army. My own family tried to have me declared mentally incompetent, steal my inheritance, and leave my mother for dead, all while I was on military leave. Before I tell you how I uncovered their entire sickening plot and brought it all crashing down in one unforgettable night, do me a solid and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's good to know who's out there listening. It all started on a Tuesday, a gray, unremarkable Tuesday. I was on a 3-week leave, my first real visit home in over a year. My sister, Clara, had thrown her phone against a wall during one of her typical tantrums, and being the responsible older brother, I offered to take it to a repair shop. I found a small, hole-in-the-wall place called Torres Tech Repair, run by a guy named Alex. He had a Marine Corps emblem tattooed on his forearm, a silent sign of brotherhood that made me trust him instantly. Screens shattered. Looks like the charging port is busted too, he said, peering at the device. Give me an hour. I'll see what I can do. I went to grab a coffee, happy for a moment of peace. The tension back at my parents' house had been thick enough to cut with a knife. When I came back, the shop was empty except for Alex. He was standing behind the counter, but he wasn't working. He was just staring at the phone, his face pale. Hey, any luck? I asked. He looked up, and his eyes were wide. He looked haunted. He glanced over his shoulder toward the empty street as if he expected someone to be listening. Man, he started, then lowered his voice. You need to listen to me very carefully. Cancel your credit cards and change your locks. Tonight. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. My training kicked in, my senses immediately on high alert. What are you talking about? What's going on? I don't know what kind of trouble you're in, he said, his voice barely a whisper. But this is bad. Real bad. He didn't explain. He just turned the phone screen toward me. He had managed to power it on. It was open to a messaging app. You need to see this, he said. My eyes scanned the screen. It wasn't a conversation. It was a series of scheduled text messages, set to be sent out over the next few weeks to a contact simply labeled M. My blood ran cold as I read the first one. The insurance paperwork is finalized. His signature is verified. Keep the copy safe. My signature? What insurance? The next message made my heart hammer against my ribs. The sale goes through once he's confirmed incapacitated. The lawyer says the custody transfer will be immediate. And then the final one, the one that made the world tilt on its axis. Plan B is ready if he puts up a fight. The house is old. Accidents happen. I stared at the screen, the words blurring together. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it, but my gut already knew. This was my sister's phone. And those messages, they were about me. That was the moment my world shattered. I stood there in that quiet repair shop, the smell of soldering flux in the air, and realized my welcome home visit wasn't a vacation. It was an ambush. I just hadn't seen the enemy yet. To understand how a man can find himself the target of his own family, you have to understand the family itself. Let me take you back 3 weeks to the day I came home. The flight from Germany was long, and all I could think about was a home-cooked meal and sleeping in my childhood bed. I walked through the door, dropping my duffel bag with a thud. I'm home. My mother, Eleanor, rushed out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Her smile was as warm as I remembered, but there were new lines of worry etched around her eyes. She hugged me tight, and for a moment, everything felt right. Oh, Charles, it's so good to have you home, she whispered, her voice a little frail. My sister, Clara, came down the stairs next. She was 4 years younger than me, had never moved out, and had appointed herself as our mother's primary caretaker. She gave me a quick, one-armed hug. Hey, big brother. Finally decided to grace us with your presence. There was a slight edge to her voice, a familiar barb I'd learned to ignore over the years. Last came my father, Richard. He walked in from his study, a newspaper folded under his arm. He was a man of few words, a retired accountant who valued order above all else. He shook my hand, his grip firm but brief. Charles, good to have you back. His eyes, however, seemed to look right through me. That first dinner was strained. I tried to share stories from my deployment, but they were met with polite nods. The conversation kept circling back to life at home. The rising cost of Mom's medications, the leaky roof, and Clara's sacrifices. I had to pass up a management training opportunity, Clara said, pushing peas around her plate. Someone has to be here for Mom. She glanced at me. Not all of us get to have an adventure life, you know? My father nodded in agreement. Your sister has a lot of responsibility, Charles. It's a heavy burden. I felt that familiar pang of guilt. I sent money home every month, more than enough to hire help or cover repairs. But it was never about the money. It was about presence. My absence was a weapon they used against me, a constant reminder that I had chosen a different life. Over the next few days, I tried to settle in, to help out, but every attempt was subtly blocked. When I offered to drive Mom to her doctor's appointment, Clara would say, "Oh, it's fine. I already have it handled. You wouldn't know the new route anyway." When I started fixing a loose railing on the porch, my father would come out and say, "That's not how you do it. Just leave it. I'll get to it." I was a guest in my own home, an outsider. I noticed how much Mom had aged. She was more forgetful, sometimes seemed confused. She'd talk about her finances with a worried frown. "Your father and Clara are handling everything," she'd tell me. "But sometimes, I just don't understand the papers they ask me to sign." I tried to press her for details, but she'd just wave a dismissive hand. "Oh, don't you worry your handsome head about it. You're home to relax." But I couldn't relax. There was a current of resentment running just beneath the surface of our family's life, and I felt like I was the only one who could feel the static in the air. I was the decorated son, the one who made it out. But in that house, I was just the one who left, and I was starting to realize that leaving had a price. I just didn't know yet how high it would be. The first real alarm bell, the one I couldn't ignore, rang about a week into my visit. I was in the kitchen making coffee when Clara walked in, her cell phone pressed to her ear. She was talking in a hushed, urgent tone. "No, Martin, the paperwork has to be airtight," she was saying. "My brother's home for a few weeks, and he's the type to ask questions. We need everything legally sound before he gets suspicious." She saw me and her eyes widened. She quickly turned her back, walking toward the pantry. "I'll call you back," she muttered and hung up. When she turned around, she was smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Morning, sleepyhead." "Who's Martin?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "Just a financial advisor," she said, waving it off as she grabbed a box of cereal. "Helping me and Dad sort out Mom's portfolio. You know, planning for the future. It's all very boring." But it wasn't her answer that bothered me. It was the lie. I'd seen the caller ID on her screen for a split second. It didn't say Martin. It said Harborline Financial. Later that day, a little digging on the internet told me everything I needed to know. Harborline Financial was a bottom-feeding firm with a string of lawsuits against them for predatory practices, specifically targeting seniors and veterans. My stomach twisted into a knot. I decided to look around. That evening, while everyone was watching TV, I made an excuse to go upstairs. I went into Clara's room, my heart pounding with guilt. I felt like a spy, a traitor, but my gut was screaming at me that something was wrong. In a drawer under a pile of sweaters, I found it. A thick folder with the Harborline Financial logo. I pulled it out, my hands trembling slightly. It was filled with legal documents, powers of attorney, medical directives, and an application for guardianship, or what they call a conservatorship. They were planning to take legal control of my mother, arguing she was no longer competent to manage her own affairs. The application was full of exaggerations and outright lies about her mental state. But the worst part, the part that made the air leave my lungs, was the signature page. There, on a document granting Clara full authority over Mom's assets in the event of my incapacitation or absence, was my signature. Or at least, a very convincing forgery of it. I saw my whole life, my career, my reputation, being used against me. The fact that I was an active-duty soldier, often deployed overseas, was being twisted from a point of pride into a liability. They were using my service as a reason to cut me out, arguing I wasn't available to make decisions. I tried to talk to Clara about it that night. I found her in the living room after Mom and Dad had gone to bed. "Clara, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I saw a folder from a company called Harborline Financial." Her face went cold. "You went through my things? I'm worried about Mom. That company has a terrible reputation. What are you and Dad planning?" She stood up, her eyes flashing with a righteous fury I knew all too well. "Planning? We're planning to take care of our mother, Charles. Something you wouldn't know anything about. You fly in here for a few weeks, play the hero, and then you leave again. We're the ones here day in and day out. We're the ones who have to make the hard decisions." "This isn't a hard decision, Clara. This is a scam. And forging my signature on a legal document? That's a felony." "I don't know what you're talking about," she snapped. "You're just paranoid. Maybe all that time in the military has made you lose your mind." She stormed out of the room, leaving me standing there in the dark, the silence of the house pressing in on me. She didn't just deny it. She attacked my sanity. It was a calculated move, and it was terrifyingly effective. It was the first time I realized this wasn't just about money. This was personal, and they were playing for keeps. The argument with Clara was a declaration of war. After that night, the pretense of a happy family reunion was gone, replaced by a cold, suffocating silence. Dad wouldn't look me in the eye. Clara spoke to me only in clipped, one-word answers. Only Mom seemed oblivious, floating through the tension in a bubble of blissful ignorance I was desperate to protect. The final confrontation before the phone incident happened a few days later. I had spent the morning on the phone with a friend of mine from the JAG Corps, just asking some hypothetical questions about conservatorship and financial fraud. He'd given me some advice that made my blood run cold, confirming just how much trouble my family was in, and by extension, me. I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I had to get through to them. I found Dad and Clara in the kitchen, huddled over the table with a stack of papers. The Harborline logo was visible even from the doorway. "We're stopping this," I said, my voice low and firm. "Right now. We are not turning Mom's life over to some predatory company. And you are not using a forged document with my name on it." My father looked up, his expression one of pure disdain. "You have no idea what you're talking about. You've been gone for years. Your mother's needs are complex. We're doing what's best for her." "What's best for her? Or what's best for you?" I shot back, my control starting to slip. "This isn't about her care. This is about her money. This is about her inheritance." Clara slammed her hand on the table, her face contorted with rage. "Her inheritance? It should be my inheritance. I'm the one who's been here. I'm the one who gave up my life for her while you were off playing soldier, collecting medals and a nice fat salary." The venom in her voice was stunning. It was years of resentment, of jealousy, of feeling second best, all boiling over in one ugly torrent. "That's not fair, Clara," I said, my own anger rising. "You know that's not what my life is like." "Oh, I know exactly what it's like," she shrieked. "You're the golden boy, the hero, Captain Charles. Well, the hero isn't here when Mom falls in the middle of the night. The hero isn't here to deal with the bills and the doctors and the forgetting things. I am." Her voice was getting louder, more hysterical. She grabbed her phone from the table. "I can't even listen to this. I can't listen to you come in here and judge me. I'm not judging you. I'm trying to protect our mother from you." That was it. That was the line. Her face turned purple with rage. With a scream of pure frustration, she hurled her phone across the room. It hit the brick fireplace with a sickening crack and clattered to the floor in a sad pile of plastic and glass. Silence. Heavy, ringing silence. My father just sighed, a disappointed, weary sound, as if I were the one who had just thrown a tantrum. Clara stood there, chest heaving, tears of rage streaming down her face. In that moment, all I felt was a profound sadness. This was my family, this broken, angry, resentful mess. I walked over and picked up the shattered phone. I'll get this fixed for you," I said softly. It was a stupid thing to say. An olive branch offered in the middle of a battlefield. But it was all I had left. It was my last, desperate attempt to be the good son, the responsible brother. As I drove away from the house that afternoon, the broken phone on the passenger seat, I had no idea that my simple, well-intentioned act of fixing it was about to blow the lid off their entire scheme. I thought I was walking into a repair shop. I was actually walking into the beginning of the end. I drove home from Torres Tech Repair in a daze. Alex had managed to clone the phone's entire drive onto a USB stick for me before I left. He'd shaken my hand, his grip firm, his eyes serious. "Be careful, man," was all he said. It was a warning from one soldier to another. The house was quiet when I got back. I could hear the faint murmur of the television from the living room. I went straight to my room, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I plugged the USB into my laptop, my hands slick with sweat. It was all there. Everything. Emails, texts, call logs, deleted notes. It was a digital roadmap of their betrayal. There were dozens of emails between Clara, my father, and Martin Sterling from Harborline Financial. They discussed Mom's assets in cold, clinical detail, the value of the house, her retirement accounts, her stocks. They talked about me as an obstacle. One email from my father stood out. "Charles's military status is a double-edged sword. We can use his absence to push the custody through, but if he finds out, his legal resources could be a problem. We need to be fast and decisive." Custody. The word made me sick. They weren't just after the money. They were after her life, her autonomy. I found the original PDF of the document I'd seen in Clara's room, the one with my forged signature. Seeing it on the screen, so clean and official, felt like a physical blow. They had taken my identity, my honor, and twisted it into a tool for their own greed. I knew I needed more than just digital evidence. I needed something tangible. I waited until I heard my parents go to bed. The house creaked around me, every sound magnified in the tense silence. I slipped out of my room and went to my father's study. The place had always been off-limits, his private sanctuary. Tonight I didn't care. The room smelled of old books and pipe tobacco. I flicked on the small desk lamp. His desk was, as always, meticulously organized. But I wasn't looking for what was visible. I was looking for what was hidden. I started with the filing cabinet. The first drawer was all tax records. The second, household bills. In the back of the third drawer, tucked away in a folder labeled Miscellaneous, I found them. Hard copies. The same guardianship application. The same power of attorney with my fake signature. But there was more. There were brochures for a place called Seabright Senior Living. I'd heard of it. It was one of those low-cost facilities with a reputation for neglect. A place you send a relative when you want to forget they exist. A cold dread washed over me. This was their endgame. They were going to take control of my mother, liquidate her assets, stick her in a home, and walk away with the money. I took pictures of every single page with my phone, my hands shaking so badly I had to take each shot twice. This was no longer a family squabble. This was a criminal conspiracy, and I was standing right in the middle of it. I called my friend Leo, my old buddy from the JAG Corps, the one person on this planet I knew I could trust. I kept my voice to a whisper, hiding in the bathroom with the fan on. "Leo, it's bad," I said, the words tumbling out. "It's my family." I explained everything, the phone, the emails, the forged documents, the senior home. He listened patiently, the silence on the other end of the line a comforting presence. When I was done, he let out a long, low whistle. "Charles, you need a lawyer. Not me, a civilian one. And you need to be smart. Don't confront them. Not yet. You're a soldier in enemy territory. Gather your intel, build your case, and choose your moment to strike." He was right. My initial instinct was to storm downstairs and confront them, to scream and rage. But my training took over. This wasn't a battle to be won with emotion. It had to be won with strategy. I had the intel. Now I had to build my case. The next morning, I acted like nothing was wrong. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I sat at the breakfast table, drinking coffee, making small talk with the people who were actively plotting to ruin my life and my mother's. My father read his newspaper, and Clara scrolled through her new phone, a cheap replacement she'd bought yesterday. They were calm, confident. They had no idea I held their entire plan in the palm of my hand. While they were distracted, I focused on the next piece of the puzzle. My military life insurance policy. It was a hefty sum, designed to take care of my family if the worst happened. My mother had always been the sole beneficiary. Always. I went to my room, logged into my official military benefits portal, and pulled up the documents. My fingers hovered over the mouse, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. I clicked the link, and there it was, in black and white. Beneficiary, Clara M. Davis. Date of change, 6 months ago. The change had been made electronically, using my login information. They must have gotten my password somehow, probably by snooping on my laptop during a previous visit. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute, it left me breathless. This wasn't just about controlling my mother's future. They had put a price on my life. They were betting on my death. Was this part of their plan for my inheritance? To cash in if something happened to me on deployment? My hands were shaking. I felt a surge of pure, white-hot rage. I wanted to smash something, to scream. I took a deep breath, forcing the soldier, the captain, to take control of the man. Emotion is a liability. Strategy is a weapon. Just as I was trying to calm myself down, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. My blood froze as I read the 2 short sentences. Stay out of this. You don't know what you're dealing with. It was them. It had to be. It was a warning shot. They must have sensed something was off, that I was getting too close. The text wasn't a threat. It was a promise. It elevated the entire situation from a disgusting family drama to something genuinely dangerous. This was the first twist, the moment I realized they wouldn't just argue with me. They would actively try to silence me. I immediately called Leo back. They changed my life insurance beneficiary, I said, my voice tight. And they just sent me a threat. Okay. Charles, listen to me, Leo said, his voice instantly sharp and focused. This is escalation. They feel you closing in and they're pushing back. You said the documents were from Harborline Financial, and the contact was a guy named Martin Sterling. Yeah, that's right. He's your next target, Leo said. But you also need to verify the medical side of this. The guardianship application would need a doctor's assessment. Find out who they used. Get to them. A third-party confirmation of their fraud is what a good lawyer will need to blow this case wide open. He was right. They had built a house of cards on a foundation of lies. All I had to do was pull out the right one, and the whole thing would come tumbling down. I looked at the guardianship papers again, scanning for a doctor's name. There it was. Dr. Bennett Evans. Our family doctor. A man who had known me since I was 5 years old. A man who had treated my colds, set my broken arm, and given me my physicals before I joined the army. They hadn't just used a stranger. They had used a man my mother and I trusted implicitly. The audacity of it was breathtaking. I now had 2 targets. Martin Sterling, the financial predator, and Dr. Evans, the unwitting witness. My mission was clear. Getting a meeting with Dr. Evans was easy. I just told his receptionist I was in town and wanted to stop by to say hello. He was a kind, gray-haired man who always smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee. Charles, look at you, he said, beaming as he shook my hand. Captain, your mother is so proud. It's good to see you, doctor, I said, trying to smile. Listen, I'm sorry to bother you, but I need to ask you about a sensitive family matter. We sat in his office, the walls covered with medical degrees and pictures of his grandkids. I took a deep breath and pulled out a photo of the medical assessment form on my phone. Dr. Evans, a few months ago, did you conduct a competency evaluation for my mother, Eleanor? He frowned, leaning in to look at the screen. A competency evaluation? No, of course not. Eleanor is sharp as a tack for her age. A little forgetful sometimes. But who isn't? Why do you ask? Because this is a document submitted as part of a guardianship petition, I said, my voice steady. And it has your signature on it. His face paled as he stared at the screen. He took the phone from my hand, his eyes scanning the page. His jaw tightened. "That's my letterhead," he whispered. "That's my medical license number. But that is not my signature. And I never ever wrote this assessment. This is a complete fabrication." He looked up at me, his kind eyes now filled with a mixture of anger and concern. "Charles, what is going on?" "My sister and father are trying to take control of my mother's estate," I said bluntly. "And it looks like they're willing to commit multiple felonies to do it." "This is fraud," he said, his voice shaking with indignation. "Identity theft. This is illegal. I'll sign an affidavit. I'll testify in court. Whatever you need. We have to protect your mother." Leaving his office, I felt a surge of grim validation. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't crazy. I was right. I had my first piece of irrefutable third-party evidence. Now for the snake himself, Martin Sterling. I knew a direct confrontation would be pointless. He was a professional liar. I needed to catch him off guard. I needed him to confess. I called the Harborline Financial office number from a burner app on my phone. "Harborline Financial. This is Martin Sterling." His voice was smooth, oily, like a used car salesman. "Mr. Sterling," I began, pitching my voice to sound earnest and a little naive. "My name is Charles Davis. I'm Clara Davis's brother. She's told me so much about the wonderful work you're doing to help our family plan for my mother's future." There was a brief pause on the other end. "Ah, yes, Charles, the captain. A pleasure to finally speak with you." "Likewise," I said. "Listen, I'm only in town for a short while, and I want to make sure I'm doing my part. My sister mentioned some paperwork, and I'd love to sit down with you, maybe go over the details to make sure we're all on the same page. I want what's best for my mom, and Clara says you're the man to make it happen." I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. He probably thought I was the clueless soldier son, easily manipulated and eager to sign off on anything to get back to my adventure life. "Of course," he said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "I'd be happy to. How about my office tomorrow morning? 10 o'clock. "Perfect," I said. "See you then." I hung up, a cold, hard knot of determination in my gut. Leo's words echoed in my head. Choose your moment to strike. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. was the moment. I went online and bought the best micro-recorder I could find with same-day delivery. This wasn't going to be a conversation. It was going to be an interrogation, and I would be the one in control. The fight was on. The next morning, I put on a pair of crisp civilian slacks and a button-down shirt. I needed to look like a respectable son, not a soldier preparing for battle. The tiny recording device was tucked securely in my shirt pocket, completely invisible. As I was about to leave, my mother stopped me in the hallway. "Where are you off to so early, dear?" she asked, her smile gentle. "Just meeting a financial advisor, Mom," I said, forcing a smile back. "Clara and Dad set it up. Just want to make sure your future is secure." The lie tasted like ash in my mouth, but it was necessary. Her innocent, trusting face was a stark reminder of who I was fighting for. Martin Sterling's office was exactly as I'd pictured it. Cheap wood paneling, generic art on the walls, and a desk that was just a little too big for the room. A pathetic attempt to project power. Sterling himself was a man in his late 50s with slicked back hair, a cheap suit, and a smile that didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. "Captain Davis, welcome," he said, shaking my hand with a grip that was surprisingly weak. "Please have a seat." I sat down, activating the recorder with a subtle click. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice," I began, playing my part. "I just want to be sure I understand the plan. Clara can be emotional. I want the logical breakdown." Sterling leaned back, steepling his fingers. He radiated a smug confidence. He thought this was a formality. "Of course, the plan is quite straightforward. Given your mother's advancing age and your demanding career, it's prudent to transfer her financial and medical authority to someone who is present. Clara, in this case. The guardianship is a simple legal step to protect her assets." "Protect them from what?" I asked. market volatility, predatory scams, even from her own poor decisions, he said smoothly. And it simplifies the estate for the inevitable inheritance process. We want to avoid probate court, which can be a nightmare. There it was. Inheritance. The magic word. I see, I said, nodding slowly. And the document I apparently signed, giving Clara authority if I'm incapacitated? I don't recall signing it. He didn't flinch. It was likely during your last visit. You'd be surprised what you can forget with your busy schedule. It was just a precaution. With your line of work, the risk is elevated. We're just looking out for the family. My jaw tightened, but I kept my face neutral. I had to push him further. And my military life insurance? I noticed Clara is now the beneficiary. Was that your recommendation as well? For the first time, a flicker of something. Annoyance? Surprise? Crossed his face. That was a private family decision. It's logical. Clara is the caretaker. It's only fair she be provided for. I see, I said again. I leaned forward slightly. Mr. Sterling, let's be direct. My concern is my career. If there's some kind of family dispute over this guardianship, could it look bad for me? For my record? For my next promotion? He saw his opening. He thought he had me. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. This was it, the moment of truth. That, he said, a greasy smile spreading across his face, is precisely why you should not make waves. You're a military officer. You're held to a higher standard. The last thing the promotions board wants to see is a messy legal scandal involving accusations of family exploitation or elder abuse. Even if the accusations are baseless, the stain remains. It's much cleaner for everyone if you just sign off, support your sister, and let us handle the details. Your career will remain pristine. I had him. It was all there. A veiled threat. An admission that creating a scandal was a possibility. He had just handed me the weapon I needed. I stood up. Thank you, Mr. Sterling. You've given me a lot to think about. The pleasure was all mine, Captain. I walked out of that office, my heart hammering not with fear, but with triumph. I had the recording. I had his confession. I thought I had won. I had no idea the counterattack was already on its way. I spent the afternoon coordinating with Julia Vance, the civilian lawyer Leo had recommended. She was sharp, no nonsense, and after I played her the recording of Sterling, she was furious. This is coercion, Charles, she said over the phone. This recording is dynamite. Combined with the forged signature and Dr. Evans's affidavit, we have a very strong case. We can file for an emergency injunction to block the guardianship petition first thing tomorrow morning. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sliver of hope. I had a plan. I had a legal team. The truth was on my side. That evening, I was in my room, emailing Julia the photos of the documents when my phone rang. The caller ID was a number from my base. It was my commanding officer, Major Thompson. Davis, he said, his voice flat and official. I'm calling about an urgent matter. Sir, I said, sitting up straight. We've received an official complaint, he continued, and I could hear the rustle of papers. It's from a family member. It alleges that you are exhibiting signs of severe emotional distress, paranoia, and aggression. It claims you are harassing your family and making baseless accusations. In short, it paints a picture of an officer who is mentally unstable. I was speechless. My blood turned to ice. It was them. It had to be Clara and my father. This was their response to my meeting with Sterling. He must have called them the second I left his office. Sir, that's completely untrue, I stammered. It's a complicated family situation, but I am perfectly fine. I hope so, Davis, he said, and his voice held no warmth. But given the nature of the complaint, and for your own protection as well as the Army's, I have no choice. Effective immediately, you are placed on temporary administrative leave from your duties. You are to cease all contact with your unit until a full psychological evaluation can be completed. A formal investigation into your fitness for command is being opened. The words hit me like a physical force. Leave. Investigation. Fitness for command. They weren't just trying to take my money or my mother. They were trying to take my life. My entire identity was wrapped up in being a soldier, a leader. They had found my biggest vulnerability and driven a knife into it. Sir, I can explain. Save it for the investigators, Captain, he said, his tone final. That's all. The line went dead. I sat there on the edge of my bed, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. This was their checkmate. How could I fight for custody of my mother if I was under investigation for being mentally unstable? How could I hire a lawyer with my pay suspended? This was the second twist, the one that truly knocked me off my feet. I was completely and utterly isolated. They had cut me off from my support system, tarnished my reputation, and weaponized my own career against me. I felt a wave of despair so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. They had thought of everything. They were going to win. And for a moment, in the suffocating silence of that room, I almost believed them. The hours after Major Thompson's call were the darkest of my life. Every path I saw was a dead end. My career was in flames, my credibility was shot, and my family was moving in for the kill. I called Julia, my lawyer, and told her what happened. She was pragmatic. This complicates things, Charles. It makes the injunction harder. They'll use this investigation to argue you're an unreliable narrator. I felt the walls closing in. I paced my room like a caged animal, fury and helplessness warring within me. I had the truth on my side, but they had the power of lies, and their lies were working. And then my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. My first thought was that it was another threat. My hands trembled as I opened it. Call me. It's Alex. From the repair shop. I stared at the name, my mind racing. Alex, the tech who started it all. I called him immediately. Charles? You okay, man? He asked, his voice low and urgent. You sound terrible. They're coming after my career. Alex, I said, the words spilling out. They filed a complaint. I'm under investigation. I knew it, he breathed. Listen, after you left, I couldn't shake the feeling that I missed something. Those scheduled messages were just the tip of the iceberg. I ran a deep data recovery on the drive clone you have. Took a while, but I found something. A deleted note fragment. It was buried deep in the cache. What did it say? I asked, my knuckles white as I gripped the phone. It wasn't much, Alex said. Just a note titled Plan B, and a few keywords. Heater. Timing. Leave before 11. Does that mean anything to you? Heater. Timing. Leave before 11. The words slammed into me with the force of a physical impact. My mind flashed to the garage. My father was a tinkerer, but he was also cheap. The garage was full of old, faulty equipment he refused to throw away. And among the junk, I remembered seeing it. A rusty, ancient-looking space heater. The house was old. The wiring was ancient. Accidents happen. Oh my God! I whispered. It wasn't just about declaring me unstable or stealing the inheritance. That was for me. Plan B. Plan B was for my mother. If she put up a fight, if she refused to go along with the guardianship, if she defended me, they had a contingency. A fire. A tragic accident in the middle of the night caused by a faulty old heater. And Clara and my father, the devoted caretakers, would be conveniently absent, having left before 11 o'clock. They would inherit everything free and clear. The thought of my mother, alone in that house, trapped, it was monstrous. It was beyond evil. This was the moment everything changed. The despair vanished, replaced by a surge of adrenaline so pure and cold it felt like ice in my veins. This was no longer a legal battle. This was a rescue mission. Alex, you're a lifesaver, I said, my voice now calm and dangerously steady. Thank you. I hung up before he could reply. I didn't need a lawyer anymore. I didn't need an injunction. What I needed was to get to my mother. I didn't even bother with the stairs. I threw on my jacket and boots and vaulted over the back porch railing, landing silently on the damp grass. I ran. I ran through the dark suburban streets, my lungs burning, my mind laser-focused. The soldier in me had taken over completely. There was a threat to a high-value asset, and I was the only one who could neutralize it. I came up to the house from the back, slipping through the gate into the darkened yard. I crept to the side door that led into the garage. It was unlocked, as always. I twisted the knob and pushed it open, the hinges groaning softly. The garage was cold and smelled of oil and dust. And there, in the far corner, was the space heater. It was plugged into a grimy, overloaded extension cord, which was then plugged into a single ancient wall socket. The dial was turned to high. It wasn't on, but it was primed. All it would take was a simple timer, the kind you use for Christmas lights, to turn it on in the middle of the night. It was a perfect death trap. Simple, plausible, deniable. This was their idea of a funeral plan. No grief, just greed. I stared at it, the sheer, calculated cruelty of it washing over me. This was the third twist, the one that revealed they weren't just thieves and liars. They were monsters. I didn't unplug it. I didn't disable it. Instead, I took out my phone and took pictures. Pictures of the heater, the frayed cord, the overloaded socket. Then, I carefully, silently, removed the fuse from the plug. The trap was now useless, but the evidence remained. I crept back out of the garage and into the night. My rage was a living thing inside me, a cold, controlled fire. They thought they had me cornered. They thought they had won. But they had made one fatal mistake. They had pushed a soldier too far. And now I was coming for them. The game was over. It was time for the reckoning. The next morning, I sent a single text message to my father, Clara, and my Aunt Carol, my father's sister, who had always played the role of the gossiping, meddling family matriarch. Emergency family meeting. My house. 7 p.m. tonight. Be there. It's about Mom's future. I didn't wait for a reply. I spent the day preparing. I called Julia, my lawyer, and told her to be there as a neutral observer. I called Detective Miller, a contact Leo had given me, a man who specialized in elder financial abuse cases. I laid out the whole story for him, sent him the evidence, and told him what I had found in the garage. He was skeptical at first, but by the time I was done, there was a grim silence on the other end of the line. "I'll have a patrol car in the area," he said, "just in case." That evening they arrived right on time. My father, looking stern and impatient. Clara, looking smug and victorious. And Aunt Carol, her face a mask of feigned concern. They walked into my living room like a conquering army. "Charles, this is ridiculous." My father started. "What is this all about? We know about your suspension. We think it's for the best that you focus on your health right now." "Oh, I'm feeling perfectly healthy, Dad," I said, my voice calm. I gestured for them to sit. Julia was already there, sitting quietly in a corner armchair, a laptop open on her knees. "Who's this?" Clara demanded, nodding toward Julia. "This is Julia Vance," I said. "She's a mediator." Clara and my father exchanged a look. They thought I had called them here to negotiate my surrender. "Let's get this over with," Clara said, sighing dramatically. "We are all very worried about you, Charles. Your paranoia, these wild accusations. It's tearing this family apart. We just want what's best for Mom." I let the silence hang in the air for a moment. Then I began. "You're right," I said softly. "This is about what's best for Mom. So let's talk about it. Let's start with Harborline Financial and your plan to put her in Seabright Senior Living after seizing her assets." My father's face tightened. Clara scoffed. "We were exploring options." "And let's talk about this," I said, and I slid a copy of the guardianship document onto the coffee table. "The one with my forged signature on it." "That's a misunderstanding," my father said, his voice hard. "You must have signed it and forgotten. Is that what Dr. Evans will say when he testifies that his signature was also forged on Mom's competency report? I have his sworn affidavit right here." I placed it on the table. Clara's smug expression began to falter. Aunt Carol was looking back and forth between us, her eyes wide. "And then there's the matter of my military benefits," I continued, my voice growing colder. "Clara, You probably shouldn't have used the family's home IP address to change my life insurance beneficiary. It leaves a digital trail a mile wide. Clara went white as a sheet. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I think you do, I said. I stood up and walked to the television. But you know, all of this, the fraud, the lies, it's just about money. It's disgusting, but it's just money. What I really want to discuss is Plan B. I picked up the remote, and the TV screen flickered to life. The first image was a close-up of the rusty space heater in the garage. My father froze. Clara let out a small gasp. The next photo showed the frayed, overloaded extension cord. The next, the timer mechanism it would have been plugged into. The house is old, I said, quoting the text message from my sister's phone. Accidents happen. You just have to make sure you leave before 11 p.m. That was it. The main twist. The final, horrifying reveal that this was never just a financial crime. My father stood up, his face a thunderous mask of rage. You have no proof, Dad, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. It's all on the drive clone from Clara's phone, the deleted note, the emails with Sterling, the scheduled texts, everything. And then came the moment that changed everything. The ultimate reveal. I looked my father dead in the eye. It was you, wasn't it? Clara was the face of it, the golden child. But you were the brains. You were the one talking to the lawyer, the one telling Sterling how to use my career against me. The one who came up with Plan B. My father's face, for the first time in my life, crumbled. The mask of stoic authority shattered, revealing the bitter, resentful man underneath. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His silence was a confession. Clara started sobbing, a raw, hysterical sound. He made me do it. He said it was the only way. Aunt Carol just sat there, her mouth hanging open in stunned silence, finally seeing the true faces of her brother and niece. The entire rotten structure of our family had just been exposed, brought crashing down by the son they had underestimated, the soldier they had tried to break. In that moment, standing there with all their lies exposed, I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the one in control. This is the moment that changed everything, when I finally took back control of my life. Thank you for sticking with me this far. You're awesome. If you would, please help me out by liking this video and commenting with the number 1 below, just so I know you made it here with me. It doesn't just help more people find this story. It lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. The sound of Clara's sobbing filled the ringing silence of the living room. My father stood frozen, his face a blank slate of shock and defeat. Julia, my lawyer, was already on the phone, speaking in a low, professional tone. As if on cue, there was a firm knock on the front door. I opened it to find 2 uniformed police officers and Detective Miller. He nodded at me, his expression grim. Mr. Davis, is everyone here? They're all in the living room, I said, stepping aside. The sight of the police uniforms shattered the last of the tension. It was over. The fight was done. Clara's sobs turned into shrieks of panic as Detective Miller read her rights. Martin Sterling's name came up, and it was clear they would be paying him a visit next. My father didn't resist. He seemed to have aged 20 years in the last 10 minutes. He held out his hands to be cuffed with a strange, detached resignation, his eyes staring at a fixed point on the wall behind me. He was placed under house arrest pending the investigation, largely due to his age. Aunt Carol was questioned and quickly released, looking shaken to her core. She couldn't even look at me as she scurried out the door, her world of family gossip and petty drama having just collided with a horrifying reality. After they were gone, the house fell silent. A profound, deafening silence. Julia gave my shoulder a supportive squeeze. You did the right thing, Charles. The hardest thing, but the right thing. I'll be in touch tomorrow morning. And then she was gone, too. I was alone. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt empty. I walked through the house, my house, which now felt like a crime scene. I saw the ghosts of my childhood, the memories of a family I thought I had, and I realized it had all been an illusion. The love, the support. It was all conditional, all built on a foundation of lies and resentment I had been too blind to see. The hardest part was the call I had to make next. I dialed my mother's number. She was staying with a friend for the night, an arrangement I had made earlier that day under the pretense of having the house fumigated. I needed her out of the way, safe from the fallout. "Charles? Is everything all right, dear?" she asked, her voice filled with a cheerful innocence that broke my heart. "Mom," I started, and my own voice cracked. "Something's happened. I need to come and get you. We need to talk." I drove over to her friend's house, and we sat in my car in the quiet, dark street. I told her everything. I tried to be gentle, to soften the blows, but there was no easy way to say it. There was no easy way to tell a mother that her husband and daughter had conspired to steal her life from her, and had been willing to end it if she resisted. She listened without saying a word, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her face illuminated by the faint glow of the dashboard lights. When I finished, she didn't cry. She just stared out the front windshield for a long time. Then she finally turned to me, and there were tears glistening in her eyes, but her voice was surprisingly strong. "Take me home, Charles. My home." As we drove back, she reached over and put her hand on my arm. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. It was an anchor in the storm. The battle against my father and sister was over. The battle to heal, to build a new life for my mother and myself from the wreckage, was just beginning. The legal system moves slowly, but it is thorough. In the weeks that followed, the case against Clara and Martin Sterling was built, brick by damning brick. My recording, Alex's data recovery, Dr. Evans's testimony, it was an avalanche of evidence they couldn't escape. Clara took a plea deal, confessing to her role in exchange for a lighter sentence that included significant jail time and mandatory psychological treatment. Sterling's financial firm was shut down, and he faced a mountain of charges, not just from my family's case, but from others who came forward after his arrest. My father was the most complex piece of the puzzle. His lawyers argued he was a concerned husband manipulated by a predatory advisor and an unstable daughter. But the emails I had uncovered told a different story. They showed him as the architect. I only saw him one more time before the trial. He was out on bail and he showed up at my house unannounced. He looked smaller, grayer. The intimidating patriarch was gone, replaced by a frail old man. "Charles," he said, his voice raspy, "we need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," I said, standing in the doorway, not moving to let him in. "Your mother. She won't take my calls," he said. "You have to make her understand. I was just trying to secure her future, to secure our future." I just stared at him, a cold calm settling over me. The anger was gone, burned out, leaving only a vast, empty expanse of disappointment. "Your future," I said, my voice flat. "Was your future contingent on my mother being locked away in a nursing home? Was it dependent on a tragic accident, with a space heater if she didn't cooperate?" He flinched, the words hitting him like stones. "It never would have come to that. That was just contingency planning." "Contingency planning," I repeated the words, letting them hang in the air. "You filed a complaint against me with the army. You tried to destroy my career, my entire life, to get me out of the way. You did that." "I did what I thought was necessary to protect this family," he insisted, a flicker of his old, self-righteous anger returning. And that's when I knew. He still didn't get it. He was sorry he got caught, not sorry for what he did. "You're not part of this family anymore," I said, the words clear and final. "You have no say in Mom's life, her health, or her finances. You will not contact her. You will not come here again. A restraining order is being filed tomorrow morning. This is the last time we will ever speak without a lawyer present. Goodbye, Richard." I used his first name. In 32 years, I had never called him anything but Dad. The effect was instantaneous. It was a final severing of a tie that had already been poisoned beyond repair. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. I closed the door in his face, the soft click of the lock echoing in the hallway. It wasn't a moment of anger. It was a moment of clarity, of peace. I was drawing a line in the sand, not out of hatred, but out of a duty to protect what was left. My mother, our home, our future, and for the first time that future felt like it was mine to build. 6 months can feel like a lifetime. The Army's investigation into my conduct concluded swiftly once the truth of the situation came to light. The complaint was dismissed, my record was cleared, and Major Thompson called me personally to apologize. "You handled an impossible situation with honor, Captain," he said. "Your command is waiting for you." The feeling of relief was immense, like a crushing weight being lifted off my chest. My identity, which had been so viciously attacked, was restored. Life at home settled into a new, quiet rhythm. My mother and I, two survivors of a shipwreck, began the slow process of rebuilding on a deserted island. I used my leave to become the son I had always wanted to be. We hired a reputable, independent financial planner, a kind woman in her 60s, who helped us untangle the mess my father and Sterling had made. We secured my mother's finances, setting up trusts and legal protections that put her firmly in control of her own destiny. The house, once a place of tension and secrets, started to feel like a home again. We painted the kitchen a bright, cheerful yellow. We planted a garden in the backyard. We talked, really talked, for the first time in years. My mother told me stories about her childhood, about falling in love with my father, about her hopes and dreams for her children. There was sadness in her eyes when she spoke of Clara and my father, a deep, motherly grief for the family she had lost. But there was also a new resilience, a strength I had never seen in her before. Clara was sentenced to 3 years in a low-security prison, with parole possible after 18 months. Part of her sentence was ongoing therapy. About 2 months in, I received a letter from her. My first instinct was to throw it away, but something made me open it. The letter wasn't an excuse. It wasn't a plea for forgiveness. It was a confession. She wrote about a lifetime of feeling invisible, of living in the shadow of the hero brother. She wrote about how my father had nurtured that resentment, feeding her a steady diet of poison, telling her she was the one who was truly owed, the one who had sacrificed. "He made me feel like taking what was Mom's was justice for me," she wrote. "I know now that isn't true. It was just theft. I'm not writing this to ask you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. I'm writing this because you deserve to know that you weren't crazy. It was real. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I read the letter twice, then folded it and put it away. It didn't fix anything. It didn't erase the hurt. But it was a flicker of something. A tiny seed of accountability in a barren field of lies. My father's trial was less dramatic. He was found guilty of conspiracy and fraud, but due to his age and a feigned display of remorse, he avoided prison. He was sentenced to 5 years of probation and hefty fines. He moved in with my Aunt Carol, a pariah in his own community. I heard from cousins that he was a ghost of the man he once was, silent and bitter. One afternoon, Major Thompson called again. "Davis, there's a promotion board coming up. Your name is at the top of the list. We'd be proud to have you as a major." I stood there, looking out the kitchen window at my mother, who was happily watering her new tomato plants, her dog Bailey chasing the water from the hose. I thought about my career, the life I had built for myself, the world waiting for me outside this quiet suburban street. And I thought about the woman in the garden, the one I had almost lost. "Thank you, sir," I said. "That's an honor. But I think I need to be here for a little while longer." I put in for an extension of my family leave. For the first time, I was choosing home not out of guilt or obligation, but out of love. The promotion could wait. My family, my real family, the one that consisted of just my mom, her dog, and me, came first. A few weeks later, my mom and I decided to tackle the one place in the house that had been ignored for decades. The attic. It was a dusty, forgotten space, filled with boxes of old memories and relics of a life that now felt like it belonged to someone else. We were on a mission to clean it out, to make space, both literally and figuratively. In a far corner, tucked under a pile of my old high school yearbooks, was a heavy wooden chest. It was my father's. I couldn't remember ever seeing it open. "What's in there?" I asked Mom. She shrugged. "Old things, I suppose. Your father was never one to throw anything away." Curiosity got the better of me. The lock was old and rusty, and I managed to pry it open with a screwdriver. Inside, it smelled of dust and time. It was filled with neatly bundled stacks of letters, tied with faded ribbon. They were letters between my father and his sister, my Aunt Carol, dating back over 20 years. I picked up the first bundle. The letters were from when I was in basic training. I started to read, and as I did, the final, missing piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This wasn't about money. Not really. The money was just a symptom. This was about a lifetime of deep, festering resentment. "Carol," my father wrote in a letter dated just a week after I had left for Fort Benning. "The house is so quiet now. Eleanor walks around like a ghost. All she talks about is Charles's letters, Charles's courage. She's proud, and I suppose I am too, but there's a part of me that feels erased. I gave up my own ambitions, my own dreams of moving to the city, to stay here and build a stable life for them. And now, the son I did it all for has run off to play soldier, and he's the one who gets all the glory for it." It was all there, in his elegant, precise handwriting. A narrative of sacrifice and bitterness I had never known existed. Letter after letter told the same story. He resented my freedom. He resented the pride my mother took in my accomplishments. He saw my life not as a success to be celebrated, but as a betrayal of the quiet, stable life he had martyred himself to provide. Clara, in his eyes, was his ally, the loyal one, the one who stayed. He saw himself in her, the overlooked, underappreciated caretaker. I found a letter written right after I had gotten my first promotion. "Carol, Charles called today. He's a first lieutenant now. Eleanor is planning a party for his next visit." Party. I worked at the same firm for 40 years and never got a party. He gets a new pin for his collar and we're supposed to roll out the red carpet. Sometimes I feel like I'm just the man who pays the bills for the hero's welcome. This was the final, devastating twist. It wasn't a sudden snap or a single act of greed. It was a slow poison that had been dripping into the heart of my family for decades. My father's actions weren't born of a sudden criminal impulse. They were the final, logical conclusion of a story he had been telling himself for my entire life. The story of a victim. I sat there in the dusty attic, surrounded by the ghosts of the past, and I finally understood. It didn't make what he did right. It didn't make it forgivable, but it made it tragic. It was the story of a small man made smaller by his own bitterness, who tried to tear down his own son's life because he was too afraid to build up his own. I didn't show the letters to my mother. It was a burden she didn't need to carry. I closed the chest, locked it, and left it in the dark corner of the attic. Some stories are better left buried. The summer now. The garden my mom and I planted is thriving. The tomato plants are heavy with fruit, and the scent of basil hangs in the warm afternoon air. I'm still on leave, but it's a different kind of leave now. It's not an escape or a duty. It's just life. My promotion to major came through. I accepted it. My career is still there for me, waiting, but I'm not in a rush to go back. I've learned that strength isn't just about what you can do on a battlefield. Sometimes it's about what you can build in a backyard. My mother is happier than I've seen her in years. She's joined a book club. She takes painting classes. She's taking back the life that was almost stolen from her. We don't talk much about my father or Clara. Their names are like ghosts that haunt the edges of our new life, but we don't let them in. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the concept of family. I used to think it was an unbreakable bond, forged in blood and shared history. Now, I know that's not true. True family isn't something you're born into. It's something you build. It's built on trust, on loyalty, on respect. It's the kind of bond one have with my mom now, stronger than ever. It's the bond one share with men like Leo, who had my back from thousands of miles away. It's even the bond one have with Alex, the stranger in the tech shop who saw something wrong and chose to speak up, changing the entire course of my life. I lost a father and a sister, but in the wreckage, I found myself. I found a deeper understanding of strength and a quiet, resilient peace I never knew was possible. The future is still uncertain, but for the first time, it feels full of hope, and I'm ready for it. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever faced a situation where you had to choose between the family you had and the principles you believed in? I'd be honored to read your story in the comments below. And please, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Take care of yourselves.